A big thank you comes to you today from Dead Rabbit via Patreon for his long support of the channel. Tiamat versus Commodore Guff, Garth One Eye, and Tovolar. No ramp and expensive dragons is probably not a hand we're going to keep. Alright, a 2-lander with expensive dragons and some slow ramp will go down a card on this one. Pray that we actually get into some lands. We get into... If that was anything except an Ancient Tomb, we wouldn't be able to keep this one, but we can go into the Arcane Signet, then hopefully Kodama's Reach. And if we don't manage to land the Kodama's Reach, we're pretty done for. We'll get rid of the Balefire Dragon here, I think. We are last in the turn order, and wouldn't mind seeing a land here. We get some more ramp, but of course, it is some expensive ramp, which is par for the course in this game so far, so get down the Arcane Signet and pray that we manage to keep hold of it. Tovolar copying us and getting down an Arcane Signet as well. And Commodore throws down a Sol Ring. Okay, still no lands. The expensive draws continue with the Dragon this time, so luckily we're able to make a land drop with the Kodama's Reach here. We'll go for a Plains and a Mountain just so that we can go for the Rith if we need to next turn. Maybe should have gone for a Forest actually, just in case we do lose the Arcane Signet and have to go in for some more land ramp. But we'll get down the Dragon's Horde at some point. A Cultivate from Tovolar as well, continuing to copy us. Garth just cycled a card. That was Boon of the Wish Giver, so was able to draw a card at the end of the turn. And then Forest cycling on his own turn with Elvish Aberration, so able to search for a basic forest, or actually just any forest card with that. So fetches out a Ketria Triome, the Tiamat Tricycle land. And here we see the first commander of the game, Commodore Guff, decides to tick up and make a wizard token with that. And finally we managed to get into a land, so we've got 2 for 6 mana available to us, so we could go after the Chromatic Orrery next turn, and for that we would need either a land drop or the Dragon's Horde to already be in place, so let's get down the Dragon's Horde here I think. And then we'll get a black and a green source with the Marsh Flats, and we don't have any blue yet either, so we'll make that the Zagoth Triome. Argument to be made for us going in for the Dragon Lord Kolaghan there so that we can hit the commander out of play here. Maybe do that next turn instead of the Chromatic Orrery. If we get a land we could do both I suppose. Another commander hits play in the form of Tovolar Dire Overlord. It's an Ominous Seas from Garth One-Eyed. Planeswalker number 2 against the Super Friends, the Hero of Dominaria. Makes another token with Commodore. Teferi was ticked up as well, so going to untap 2 lands at the end of the turn. And also triggers the Commodore as well, putting a loyalty counter onto the Teferi. Alright, a land here would be ideal. Unfortunately not, it is more mana, so I think we have to go for the Dragon Lord Kolaghan then. We can first go for the Felwar Stone at least, that's 3, 4, 5 and 6, yes we can. And we can add all 5 colours with the Felwar Stone thankfully. Alright, and the Jeskai player was holding up priority there, but decided to allow it down pretty quickly, so we'll assume there's no counter magic. He may well have removal here though. Going to deal with the Teferi first and foremost, and seems as though there's no removal in our opponent's hand either, so we do deal with the Planeswalker. So hopefully next turn we'll be able to get down the Orrery, and then go for Rith, and still have some haste and then protection on the board as well. Maybe start to look at refilling our hand with Tiamat. Although it might be worth getting down the Dragon at this point. The first werewolf in the 99 here, Gaia Reach Bandit. That is a 3-2 with haste. And Tovolar swings in at us for 3 commander damage. Not particularly worried about the Planeswalker over there seemingly. The 3-2 turns in at Garth, and then follows up the turn with an Aggravated Assault, so for 5 mana we'll untap all the creatures and get an additional combat phase. Wilderness Reclamation for Garth One-Eyed. Untaps all his lands at the beginning of his end step. Vronos, Masked Inquisitor this time. Don't see this one that often. So they'll be able to phase out the Planeswalkers this turn. Oh, it's 2 other Planeswalkers, so can only have his commander phase out. So won't be able to take that down. Missed our chance with that when we didn't go for the Dragon Lord here, which maybe I should have done. And then minusing down with the Commodore, draw X cards and deal X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of Planeswalkers you control, so that is 2 at the moment of course. Then deciding to just leave it at that, so Commodore can put a plus counter on this, making it survive our Dragon Lord's attack. And this thing phases out so that we can't attack it during the next turn cycle. Alright, so let's see what we draw into here. We're getting into mana, just not in the form of lands. A Nature's Law. If we'd drawn into a land there, I've been tempted to go for the Dragon. As it stands, we can go Nature's Law into the Orrery, into Rith, which isn't the worst. Getting ward on our creatures, I don't mind doing particularly. So we'll go for an untapped land with the Nature's Law. Not worthy that Garth is holding up priority, but I hope he wouldn't interfere with us because we are looking over at the Super Friends player. Made that abundantly clear to our opponents. Again, Garth continuing to hold up mana and decides to allow it into play. So we'll try and get down the Rith, and a second counter goes onto the Dragon's Horde, so we'll be able to start drawing cards with that at some point, I hope. And now that Rith has landed, we've got Ward 2 on all of our dragons, making them more difficult to target. And do we just deal with this thing so that they can stop phasing out Planeswalkers? It's probably the best thing to do here. So we'll take both of them in at the Walker, seeing as how we're the only ones that can do that at this point. I'd like to encourage the Werewolf player to swing in at the Walkers as well, so that he can have these be blocked and destroy them, but I don't know if we can trust the Werewolf player to do things like that. But we need to start getting into some more permanent mana before we get sent back to the Stone Age with something like a Vandal Blast. Mayor of Averbrook for the Werewolves. It is still daytime, so it gives an Anthem effect to the other humans. And Full Moon's Rise, so you can sacrifice it to regenerate your Werewolves, and it gives them +1 and trample. Obviously, this is a Werewolf aggro deck our opponent's built. Alright, Tovolar is going in at the Super Friends player now. And we get the now 5/3 Gaia Reach Bandit. So we're already down to 21 by turn 6. So if there isn't too scary a Planeswalker coming down from the Jeskai player, we might have to drop the Dragon and whack the Werewolves player for a lot of damage next turn. Tovolar draws cards when these Werewolves hit. No blocks were made by the Wizard tokens, and they do have trample anyway, so it would have gone through. Yet another card cycled for basic land cycling. We'll assume that he went for that island that he just played. And there is Zerda, the Dawnwaker, so able to make activated abilities cost 2 generic less. Then cycling again, Flame Blitz this time. Able to draw another card into the Ominous Seas. So 3 counters on this. I assume it needs 8. Yeah, remove 8 foreshadow counters from it to make an 8/8 Kraken. Just notice what Flame Blitz does actually, I've never seen this one. At the beginning of your end step it deals 5 damage to each Planeswalker, so yeah, he's obviously deciding to be nice to the Super Friends player for some reason. And there's an Urza's Ruinous Blast, that is Wrath number 1. Exile non-land permanents that are not legendary. Luckily this thing is legendary, but yeah, it's only a matter of time before we lose our rocks. So we'll see how much longer people play nice with the Super Friends player. And there's a Guff. Rewrites history. For each player, choose a non-enchantment, non-land permanent that player controls. Those permanents shuffle into the libraries. Each player who controls one of the permanents exiles cards from the top until they get a non-land card. Then put the rest on the bottom in a random order and cast the non-land card without paying the cost. Can't rely on the Chromatic Orrery anymore, unfortunately. A Decree of Justice was cycled here. And got into some soldier tokens, and exiled for us was a Crux of Fate, destroying all the non-dragon creatures, so we can maybe keep our opponents from playing creatures here. Actually, that's a Gruul Signet our opponent will play. A Faith of the Devoted will probably play as well, so might as well go for this, get rid of those tokens. But until we get into another coloured source, we actually can't afford our Tiamat now. Alright, so let's see what we get here. Of course it's not a land, we can afford to cast the Mana Reflection though at least. So let's go through to at the beginning of combat first and foremost, and we'll deal with the Commodore with the 5 damage from Rith, and then we'll take the Dragonlord Kolaghan in over there as well. Taking our opponent below 30 and removing the Planeswalker. Planeswalker does go back into the command zone, so we'll assume that he doesn't have any recursion at the moment. And let's finish off our turn with this Mana Reflection. Hopefully we keep our dragons intact, ready for the Dragon next turn. The Gruul player casting a Feral Encounter. Look at the top 5 cards, exile a creature from amongst them, the rest go on the bottom. You may cast the exile card this turn. At the beginning of your next combat phase, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to a target creature you don't control. So did they get the Outland Liberator from it? I assume so, because they've got 7 cards in hand. And not likely that the 2/2 is going to bite something here. They'd have to pay the ward cost anyway. It is noteworthy that this can be sacrificed to get rid of the mana reflection from us. So hopefully we get at least one turn with it. Garth One Eye finally hitting play after the board wipe. And cycling again, this time with Curator of Mysteries. Over to the Jeskai player's turn. That is a Jaya's Phoenix. Flying Haste 3/3. When it deals combat damage to a player or walker, copy the next loyalty ability. Whenever you cast a planeswalker, you can return this from graveyard to the battlefield. Obviously our opponent doesn't have any walkers left in play now, thanks to us. Alright, if we can get the mana reflection through to the next main phase, I'll be happy. And we can't even cast the Drakuseth because of our lack of red mana at the moment. Yeah, so even with a mana reflection in play, we're not doing too well here. Losing those rocks has made a difference. So we'll just have to continue focusing on Super Friends before he wipes the board again. And the way this works, if we don't cast a spell, it's going to become Night, which buffs this up to a 3/3, so just 1 extra damage. But it will come in at us and destroy the mana reflection, unfortunately. Ugh. So this is now a Frenzied Trapbreaker. And we'll see what our opponent decides to throw down here. Looks as though he's casting something. A Howling Moon. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature gets +2/+2. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, make a wolf token. So it's 5 damage, knocking us down to 14 we're going to take here, seemingly. And as you would expect, the Trapbreaker comes in towards us and blows up the mana reflection. Still just waiting for 1 land off the top, but we're still quite reliant on this Ancient Tomb, which I'm sure we've taken a lot of damage to over the course of the game. I think we've tapped it every single turn here, and it's turn 8. 2 additional lands off the top after the Ancient Tomb. Garth One Eye being activated again for the first time, and choosing a Black Lotus with that. Then cycling occurs again with the Greater Sandworm this time. That triggers the enchantment, Faith of the Devoted, but it doesn't seem as though our opponent put any mana into that. Crucible of Worlds being played into the enchantment, which makes a wolf token. Are there any lands? No lands in the bin at the moment, but obviously has cycling lands in this cycling deck. Oath of Gideon for the Super Friends deck is 2 core ally tokens, and Silent Arbiter, a little bit of a pillow fort theme for the Planeswalker player apparently. Again, casting into the Howling Moon, making another token. And okay, that is more ramp. We're getting into plenty of ramp, but no lands, and yeah, it's actually the lands that we're missing here, so I'll just throw that down and going to start being more reserved with our attacks, I think. So passing the turn straight over, the commander comes back into play again for the Gruul player. A +2/+2 buff going on to what is now an Outland Liberator. Daytime has occurred now that the players have cast 2 spells during their turns, and now encouraging our opponent to go elsewhere. A couple of tokens down the middle, and the Liberator swings in at the Super Friends player, but not realising that the Silent Arbiter is in play. So it's just the 4/4 swinging in down the middle now. That hits, so Tovolar draws a card. Another card cycled during the end step without weakness this time. And it seems as though our opponent is paying into the enchantment now, so we go down to 12. And then a Brain Geyser was just cast off the back of the Garth One Eye, so I think it was 9 into X, 13 cards in this player's hand. Bunch of cards discarded hand size, doesn't have the mana held up for the enchantment, thankfully. We see a Blasted Landscape, Reconnaissance Mission, Ash Barrens, Igneous Pouncer, and a Smouldering Crater. So there are now lands in the bin ready for the Crucible of Worlds. Another Oath in the form of Oath of Jace. When it enters, draw 3, discard 2. And now seeing another Planeswalker, Teo Geometric Tactician this time. When it enters the battlefield, create a wall token. And then you and the target opponent each draw a card for the +1. The -2, choose left or right until your next turn. Each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the chosen order. And then for the -2, choose left or right until your next turn. Each player may attack only in that direction. Going for the -2 on this, and has chosen left, so we can only attack in over here, protecting him from our dragons. Okay, let's see if we're actually able to do something here. And finally getting into a land, that's excellent. So let's just go straight in for our commander, I think. Tempted as I am to swing in over here, it might be that the Liberator is sacrificed in order to get rid of this so that they can better go wide on us. Not sure how many creatures they would put into trying to go wide on us. I was just going to swing in with the Colligan, but at such a low life total it's probably best trying to set up alpha swings at this point. So I think we want the Scion of Draco. That will cost 1 less, don't forget. Probably best going for Old Gnawbone for the sake of more mana. And Goldspan Dragon will double up those tokens as well, making them tap for 2 mana as opposed to just 1. Terror of the Peaks will throw additional damage around. And as tempted as I am to go for the Ancient Silver Dragon, we'd have to land damage with it and roll well. And I think we'd just rather try and guarantee a couple of cards with Two-Headed Hellkite. So we can now play out the Scion of Draco. It would have cost 2 mana thanks to us having Domain, but it costs 1 less thanks to the Dragon Lord Servant. And Howling Moon will make another wolf token. Alright, so this actually gives our stuff Vigilance now, so as long as we can get through to the attack phase, we should still be able to do something here without worrying as much about the swing back. And we can only attack in at the left. It might as well be commander damage here, so we'll go in with Tiamat. Might be able to get double strike down in the next turn or two. Yeah, what a difference getting into 1 land can make here. Alright, playing a Leaping Ambush, probably just because it has a wolf on it. Target creature gets +1/+3 and reach until the end of the turn. They put that on a token to throw under the Tiamat. We still gain the life here, so I'm fine with this. And we do still get a little bit of trample damage through. Okay, but they decided not to block anyway. Maybe they did that too late. Did they do it during the blocking phase? Our opponent does control 3 or more wolves here, so he's able to transform with the Tovolar. So this thing now able to take out artifacts and enchantments. Again, we'll have to worry about the ward on the Scion of Draco if he wants to do that. And he'll only be able to swing in with 1 creature here. Could always go in with Tovolar in order to give a big buff onto something and try and take someone out. Or at least chip away towards taking someone out. Wild Growth goes onto an untapped forest. Duskwatch Recruiter now. You can use this as a bit of card advantage if you have the mana. Oh, that's not good. A Beastmaster Ascension. You need 7 counters on this, I think. Yeah. And there's 4, 5, 6, 7 creatures in play, one of which has Summoning Sickness, thankfully. Can only attack in with 1 creature anyway until this thing is dealt with. Another enchantment in the form of Howlpack Resurgence. Each creature you control that's a wolf or werewolf gets +1/+1 and trample. Noteworthy, this does have flash, so we could have held off on that. Now cannot afford the ward cost to blow this up, but probably not going to swing in towards us anyway. The buff goes on to the Frenzied Trapbreaker again, and decides to send in a dispensable 3/3 token down the middle, just for the sake of drawing a card. Alright, and seemingly needed that to draw into a land for the turn, so can still sacrifice this if he needs to. An Approach of the Second Sun was cast briefly there. Okay, this player cast Approach of the Second Sun, and then decided to concede. Commodore Guff coming into play for a second time, I think it is. Yeah, 6 mana spent. The 3/3 goes in at the werewolves. We can attack freely now, thanks to Teo's ability wearing off. So now, after hitting, he's going to be able to copy an activated loyalty ability. So minusing down with Commodore in order to deal some damage and draw some cards. Teo again going for the minus ability, so that Planeswalker is dealt with. Forces us to go in at the werewolf player, which we were going to attack in over here anyway. I think it's getting down Old Gnawbone and then swinging in with Tiamat. And then we'll try and do some stuff with Goldspan Dragon and Terror of the Peaks. Okay, by some miracle managed to draw into a land straight off the top. So it takes some life. We'll go for the Old Gnawbone straight away, which will cost us only 6 mana. And we do have Ward 2 on all of our stuff, so it's not likely our opponents are going to be able to do anything here. We can deal with the Silent Arbiter this turn most likely, but I think I'd rather force the Gruul player to use his resources to do that. And also it's holding the Alpha Strike back on the form of the Beastmaster Ascension. We'll just try and get rid of the player instead of the permanents. So the only player we can attack is to the left, and we'll use Tiamat to do that. Alright, so we go back up to 18, continuing to keep that Ancient Tomb online. Obviously keep us in the game as well. Old Gnawbone will trigger and get us 7 treasure tokens. Alright, so we'll get down the Goldspan Dragon first so that we can maximise the amount of mana that we make from the treasures. Only 4 mana for the Goldspan Dragon, thankfully. And I do appreciate that we're playing into a board wipe here, but we do have lifelink on all of our stuff at least, so no one's going to be wanting to attack into these big creatures anyway. Lifelink and first strike, that is. I think we just need to play to our outs at this point. Get down Terror of the Peaks as well. And I'm just working out now the generic mana. We can make it so that we can go for Wooburg here, I think. Apart from the red. Yeah, not sure if we can do that, but we're going for the Drakuseth anyway, so doesn't matter. We'll just make a bunch of red with these treasures. And if the board stays intact until next turn, what we'll probably do is get down a big creature and blow this thing up so that we can attack him freely. But Drakuseth coming down is going to deal 7 damage to something here. And as tempting as it is to force the issue with this, I think they might be looking to blow this thing up with it at the end of the turn anyway, so yeah, I'll try and make them think about the swing back. I mean, it doesn't matter if they swing in or not because we've got a bunch of flyers. Yeah, so I'll just go for face with that. So our opponent goes down to 8 and is at 14 points of commander damage. And we're looking for an Alpha Strike next turn, but it all relies on dodging board wipes here, and we are against a Super Friends player. Surprised we've only seen 1 wipe so far. Tovolar will transform everything because, again, controls a lot of wolves and werewolves. A Village Watch is haste with Daybound. Comes down as a Nightbound creature, of course. Wolves and werewolves you control have haste. Still can only attack him with 1 creature while this remains. Then Berserker's Onslaught. Gonna give everything double strikes, so that kind of negates our first strike. So we may well lose a lot of creatures here. Goes through to the beginning of combat, so not looking to swing in with a whole group of creatures. Can still only attack this player thanks to the Teo. That is the Frenzied Trapbreaker, a 6/6 with double strike, haste and trample. The Ascension gets its second counter, and deciding now to blow up the Silent Arbiter, ready for us to do whatever we want next turn. Did they not realise they can sacrifice this? Okay, in Path to Exile in response, going on to this. That doesn't keep the trigger from resolving. So this thing still goes down. I have a feeling that the Ward 2 has made a difference this game. So down goes the Arbiter. Noteworthy that it does become day again now, so the werewolves transform back into humans. Both of Jace will get a Scry 1 thanks to having 1 Planeswalker in play. So time to see if we can dodge a board wipe from the Jeskai player. What on earth is that? Ah, a Wrath of God, I think I just read. Destroying all the creatures in play, you would expect that from a Super Friends player. Yes, Tiamat can go into the command zone, so we can draw into some reanimation at some point. That would be great. And we can see now part of the reason that I don't know if I could have cast this anyway, but this has haste on it, so it's good to be able to get it down and carry on whacking your opponent. A Teferi Master of Time can phase it out though. Wolf token comes into play. The Jaya's Phoenix into play as well, can block it. Although, no, this does have Menace, doesn't it? Looting with Teferi. And discards a Boros Signet. Noteworthy that the Wolves are 3/3s with Trample, get buffed up even further, so we're going to need our opponent's help getting rid of the Super Friends player. It all depends on if he sees this player as a threat or not. And a loyalty counter going on to the Teferi Master of Time. This can play its loyalty abilities at instant speed, so a -10 is 2 extra turns after this one, currently on 6. And we draw into a land, so play that. And I think we're fine going in for the 2-headed Hellkite here. And then it's difficult to know which colour to leave up here. Yeah, we'll just have to hope that we don't get into anything relevant that costs 3 mana and wish that we'd held up a different colour. Now, do we attack the player or do we go in for Teferi? We might be able to give this player a second wolf token depending on what we draw into. And then hopefully they would attack in over here as well. I'll risk going after the player, I think. Noteworthy that we are allowed to attack, so we're assuming that this player's going for the extra turns with the loot. We'll draw 2. Alright, now going for phasing out, so we were allowed the card draw there, when perhaps we shouldn't have been. But we forced that Teferi to tick down at least. Alright, and there's a Skyshroud Claim and another land, so finally starting to make the lands. Tovolar into play again. And could use the additional mana to pump up the wolf token. I think you can do this on wolves. Teferi ticking up and going for the loot. And yep, the now 5/5 with double strike and trample goes straight at the face of the Super Friends player. Discarded a Search the Premises here, by the way. A block being made by the Phoenix, who he hopes to keep in play by throwing out more Planeswalkers. hits once with the Tovolar triggering for a card draw. It will hit a second time for another card draw. And then a World at War from the Werewolf player, so he may well be able to get rid of the Jeskai player here. And it's a further +2/+2 from the Howling Moon onto this, so that is now a 7/7, can't quite get rid of us. And yeah, he's looking to get rid of the Super Friends deck. This now has 4 counters on it, 3 more before it becomes even more relevant. Noteworthy that Teferi could phase it out here, because it does have a -3. Doesn't look like he's doing that for whatever reason. Has he already activated that this turn? Okay, it is allowed to hit. Okay, it is allowed to hit. Takes him down to 2, and then looks like the second strike is going to come in. Maybe he's already activated this. It takes a while for people to get their turns fully performed, so maybe I missed something there, but yep, managing to get rid of that player. Commodore goes down. Alright, so let's see what we can get done here. Another land, watch, we're going to start drawing a bunch of lands now. So we could get down the Ur Dragon, draw a card and put a permanent from hand onto the battlefield. Or we could go for the card draw just straight with the 2-headed Hellkite, and then if we have to just get blockers in play, then so be it. Our commander will cost us the same amount as the Ur Dragon at this point anyway, so I think I just swing in with the 2-headed Hellkite and we'll see what we draw into, because it's not likely that we'll be able to get a hasty dragon into play, and that won't be all that relevant anyway because we have to draw into it first. Alright, Urza's Incubator could be relevant, but I did say we're just going to start drawing into lands here. Alright, so let's see what we can do. Go for the Arid Mesa to get ourselves a Savannah, simply because it's an untapped dual land. Then it's Urza's Incubator, obviously going to name Dragon with this. And then we just get down the Tiamat, I think. So Howling Moon, gonna make another token, which could be relevant for... Yep, that gives them the token they need in order to get the effect on this, which could be enough to deal enough damage to us thanks to the trample and the double strike. I mean, we've just been too slow for too long here, struggled with the lands this game. But I think the game turned out quite nicely. We went off pretty quickly in the early game, but I did say that it was risky having so many rocks in play, and we did get punished for that in the end. Ended up taking off a few turns trying to get into mana. But the board wipes from the Jeskai player were relevant this game. So something we wanted there was Scourge of Valkus, really. If we could have got into that and then played a dragon into it, that would have helped us. We could have got the last bit of damage through, but obviously it relies on too many things going right for us. So it doesn't really matter here. We'll go for the Scourge of Valkus, Balefire Dragon, the Ancient Silver Dragon, Silumgar, and Dramoka. Alright, so there's Rebound on the World at War as well, which I forgot about, so yeah, the deck was truly going to take us out here. They will get to transform Tovolar as well, so able to buff things up for a bunch of mana if they want to. So there's a few different ways in which they have us here. Crash through to draw a card, and then giving his commander a buff. That is now a 16/5 with trample. The buff from the Howling Moon goes on to Tovolar as well, so an 18/7. And then everything has double strike and trample, so some 3/3s turn in as well. They'll get buffed up by +5/+5 with the Beastmaster Ascension, which unfortunately we don't have any wolf art for yet. So now 8/8 trample tokens and a 23/12 Tovolar, so we'll take the damage here and see how much it amounts to. Okay, and we go down to -4 with the first strike damage, plus a further 23 and 16 damage here, so whatever that amounts to. Just had a grip of lands in hand, so yeah, we needed another turn or so really, but that pretty much summed up the entire game there. Didn't have the best openers to start off with, so I think we did pretty well there, considering. A different card from our opponent here and there, and it would have made all the difference, but that's Commander for you. Turned out to be a fun one, I think, so hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. I will see you all in the next one, I hope. Big thank you to the patrons, as ever, for their support of the channel. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.